If Clara is venerable, what does that make Ludmilla? They associate wisdom and experience with age. That makes Clara the eldest among us. Clara's eyes went from Leanne to Ludmilla, and then back to Elder Char AC. She wasn't sure where to start with her rebuttals or if it was worth the energy at all. Judging by what she had learned about Roland Gork so far, denials might even affect her standing in the eyes of the Beastmen. She went to the space the Beastmen had made at the table for them, folding her legs under her as she seated herself on an overly warm rug. Baroness Radnik provided a rough idea of what you need, she said. If I understand it correctly, you are concerned about how recent and future changes will impact the state of your society. In the broadest of terms, yes, Elder Char AC replied. Our main concern at the moment is the effect of the teachings of Master Leeds and his followers. It has barely been half a year, yet so much has already changed. Blaming everything on the humans is unfair, Lady Shawk said from somewhere over her shoulder. They aren't responsible for the floods or the Yorgulan invasion, and we were already doing new things before that. We aren't a traditional clan to begin with, at least not since the city grew over us. I believe I understand the position of your elders, Clara said, but what is your position on the matter, Lady Shawk? My priority lies with the survival of my people, the Osalo Lord replied. I respect the opinion of Char AC and the other elders who are worried about the same thing, but we just don't have the time or resources. The lives of millions are at stake, and I won't impede our efforts to save as many as we can. Your response is misleading, Elder Char AC growled in protest. It implies that we do not care how many perish so long as our concerns are addressed. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Being caught between quarreling beastmen was intimidating, to say the least. I believe it's been established that no one here desires such an outcome, Ludmilla said. Additionally, I recommended Countess Corlin because she is best equipped to advise you on the aspects of governance that will be necessary for your people given Roland Gork's apparent course. She is not here to take anyone's side. Nor do I believe it necessary, Clara said. Forgive me for saying so, but I've sensed a feeling of powerlessness here, be it from Lady Shawk or the members of her court. Much of this seems to stem from the unprecedented circumstances you find yourselves in. What I have to share will not in itself extricate you from those circumstances, but it should empower you with the means to better navigate the way ahead. The beastmen rearranged themselves so more people could fit around the long table. Those who could not stood behind the people seated across from her, staring intently with their cat-like eyes. Clara organized her thoughts as the gathering settled down. To begin with, Clara said, I would like to better grasp the mechanisms that drive Roland Gork's political and economic realities. What do you mean by that? Lady Shawk asked. Perhaps I should provide an example from human society, Clara said. A human lord divides their territory between their subjects, and the resulting agreements are bound by legal contract. Simply put, the contract grants enough land for the subject and their family to survive on in normal circumstances, in addition to a portion of production that goes to the lord. In exchange, the lord is obliged to maintain security, infrastructure, and the rule of law. Does this sound familiar to you? It does, Lady Shawk said. That's how the warrior clans work. Well, there are some differences. A portion of production is offered for what you mentioned, but it's tribes doing it, not individual families. I suspect this is due to a difference in primary industries, Clara said. Humans in this region live sedentary lives because they grow crops, thus specific parcels of land can be allocated to each household. The tribes here use seasonal ranges for their herds, which likely cover the sum of a tribe's territory. I haven't really thought about why things are like that, Lady Shawk said, just that they are. That's not a problem, Clara said. What's important is that we have points of common understanding to build a foundation with. You mentioned that a portion of a tribe's production is contributed to the warrior clans. How exactly are those contributions utilized? They feed the warriors. Clara waited for several moments, but nothing more appeared to be forthcoming. She turned her attention to Elder Char AC, but he had nothing to add. In that case, Clara said, Does Clan Pacan employ a similar system? Yes, Lady Shawk replied. Once again, the Overlord didn't care to elaborate. It was like discussing things with Ludmilla in many ways. Am I correct in assuming that the contributions collected from your people go towards the training and livelihoods of those who help maintain security in your territory? Yes, that's right. We'll be sending warbands to help fight the Yorgulans once they're ready, as well. How do you fund the other functions of your government? Clara asked. The various infrastructure projects we've seen around the clanhold, for instance. People pay to use them, Lady Shawk answered. Merchants pay fees to use the harbour and the trading outposts. What about the locks and shipyards we saw under construction? Master Leeds said that our harbour fees will cover the cost of building and operating the locks. The shipyards will be run by the Shipwrights Guild. How many guilds have been established here? There's one for every trade, Lady Shawk replied. They are all pretty small right now, but there's no shortage of people applying for apprenticeships. At this rate, most of the citizens will be artisans within 2 generations. Except that won't happen, Ludmilla said. The attention of the gathering abruptly shifted in response to the statement. Lady Shawk's eyes went wide, her ears and tail rising in unison. It won't? She asked. It won't, Ludmilla answered. What she means to say is that the guilds limit their membership to what they deem necessary to support the population, Clara said. In human terms, a city only needs about 1 blacksmith for every 1,000 citizens, a tailor for every 350, and a carpenter for every 400. There are many other trades with their associated guilds, of course, but only 1 in 20 individuals would be part of a craft guild in an urban population. Any more than that and there isn't enough work to go around for each artisan. Master Leeds never said anything about that. He may have had multiple reasons for his omission, Clara said. He may even not have considered it at all. Rolengork is so expansive that the full establishment of the guilds throughout your confederation is not something he will see within his lifetime. Even if he did think about disclosing that particular bit to you, Leanne said, I doubt he would have. The guilds have nothing to gain and everything to lose by saying so. Gain? Lady Shawk flicked her ear. Lose? Why would he hide something so important? I fear to ask, Elder Char AC said, but what would happen in the event of the full establishment of the guilds in Rolengork? I can't say for certain, Clara said. The result varies from country to country, even between small territories. What I can say is that guilds are institutions whose mandate is to protect the interests of their members. Protect them against what? Lady Shawk asked. Some people might not like certain things that the guilds are doing, but no one is hostile towards them. Limiting apprenticeships is one example, Clara answered. Another is advocating for or against legislation that impacts the livelihoods of their members. For the most part, however, the guilds protect themselves by mandating a framework of rules and regulations that their members are expected to conduct themselves by. Lady Shawk raised a paw to scratch the back of her neck. They protect themselves using the rules that they place on themselves? It is strength through order, Clara said. This should not be so different from how the warrior clans of your confederation conduct themselves. Instead of martial might, however, the guilds wield economic and political influence as their primary weapons. Controlling who can become an artisan and holding those who do to their rules also means that they control the vast majority of urban industry. Given the role of cities in Rolengork, this probably means little to you, but the guilds are very much transforming the world around them according to their ideals. Then we must stop this transformation before the guilds dare to bare their fangs at us, Elder Char AC said. Hey now, Leanne said. It's too early to jump to conclusions. We've only just sat down. What more do we need to hear when these people clearly plot to undermine our society? Because it isn't so clear, Clara said. The main strength of the Merchant Guild is that it is an institution that has been refined over countless centuries. It's highly probable that Master Leeds and his people are simply doing what they believe they should be doing without the intent of visiting any ills upon Rolengork. What is overwhelming you right now are the systems developed by the Merchant Guild, as you currently have nothing of your own to effectively counterbalance them, and those systems aren't necessarily bad, Leanne added. The guilds use them because they work. If Lady Shawk is sincere in her intentions, then she doesn't have the luxury to pick and choose what to use based on how they appeal to your cultural sensibilities. As far as I've seen, the guilds stand the best chance of expanding your economic reach and logistical throughput to the greatest extent in the shortest amount of time, which is exactly what you need right now. Are you of the same opinion, Countess Clara? I am, Clara nodded. Unless there's something substantial that we're unaware of, facilitating the expansion of the Merchant Guild is the most effective method that Rolen-Gork has at its disposal to save itself with. Then we are in no better a situation than when we started this conversation, Elder Char AC growled. By trying to save our people, we will lose who we are. Honestly, the challenges you face concerning the Merchant Guild are not dissimilar to those in human society, Clara said. I would even go so far as to say you are ahead of most because you recognize the influence that the guilds may have on your people and seek solutions to undesirable outcomes. Truly? Yes, Clara smiled slightly. Most human lords don't even register merchants as a threat. They hold no territory, possess no personal military prowess, and occupy the lowest rung of society as far as our aristocratic establishment is concerned. The guilds are generally content to function under those biases as it generally allows them free rein in whatever they're doing. That's pretty much how the warrior clans treat merchants, Lady Shawk said. They are convenient people who move stuff around without needing direct involvement from the clans. We never knew they were so treacherous, Elder Char AC said. Once again, Clara told the elder, it would be wrong to attribute their actions to purposeful malice. Most people in general base their decisions on what they believe to be the correct choice given their circumstances. What should be considered is the impact that any group of people has on society, whether it is desirable or not, and how to go about addressing it. It was a fine line to tread, at least for her. Most nobles had few issues using heavy-handed methods to deal with what they considered undesirable behaviors. According to the mandates of her faith, however, a merchant acting as a merchant was not a sin. Rather than that, it was considered virtuous behavior. Ludmilla was the same. The reason why she had declared war on the guilds was because they were defying her authority as a noble by attempting to force their regulations on her territory. If we may know, Elder Char AC said, how does the Sorcerer's Kingdom address the issues created by the guilds? By harnessing its capabilities to further our policy goals, Clara said. In a situation where the guilds have already established themselves, they provide the vast majority of vocational education and represent nearly all of the industry and commerce in urban centers. This is not something that can be replaced on a whim. Instead, we intend to remake the guilds into an institution that serves our national interests. But surely they would resist such a move. Elder Char AC said, Master Leeds and his people do not heed our concerns at all. At best, they dismiss them as primitive and irrelevant. You never told me about this, Lady Shawk said. It's not something they've directly stated, the Osalo elder replied, but you can sense it in their words and actions. You instructed us to cooperate with them, so we have set aside our discontent for the greater good. We've noticed this, as well, Clara said. Master Leeds seems to consider the role of the Merchant Guild in Rolen-Gork is to civilize your people. I can't imagine it's a pleasant attitude to suffer. Whether we suffer it or not makes no difference, Elder Char AC said. Master Leeds does as he will either way. That particular problem stems from the fact that you appear to be individuals challenging an institution, Clara said. One that is far larger and more comprehensive than you realize. The kind of power that the guilds hold only answers to challenges to that power. How do we gain this power you speak of? By creating it, Clara answered. You already have institutions representing the interests of your people, but they don't exist in a form that the guilds recognize. Merchants are trained to interpret the world with a transactional mindset. Systems of honor and those that promote communal well-being, like those employed in Rolengork, hold little in the way of material value, or even detract from it, and thus tend to be overlooked or disregarded outright. We have no desire to be transactional, the Osalo elder said. This mindset, as you put it, is the root of all of our issues with the guilds. It may be useful when it comes to trade, but the deteriorating state of the city and its inhabitants over the generations warns us of the folly of applying this type of thinking to everything. It may seem distasteful to you because the guilds are a few steps ahead. This has allowed them to set precedents and shape the narrative surrounding your current circumstances as heavily in their favor as possible. As a result, you have been prevented from exploring effective methods of countering their machinations. Yet you say they do not act out of purposeful malice. Clara did her best not to swallow as she eyed the beastmen across from her. Nearly all of them bore expressions that she couldn't imagine were anything but filled with hostility. As I mentioned earlier, she said, the guilds look out for the interests of their members first and foremost. Historically, their main opposition to doing that is local government, and so the systems of the guilds have developed over centuries to overcome that obstacle. With those systems comes a culture that their members are raised to believe is not only the most efficient and productive way of doing things, but also morally correct. Somehow, you've made things sound even worse than we already thought they were, Elder Char AC muttered. There are few that I've observed that don't get themselves in this sort of situation, Clara said. People are the product of their experiences and knowledge, and few have the opportunity to look beyond the world they exist in. Due to this, guild members can ironically be very well-traveled, yet remarkably bigoted. There is truth in your words, the Osalo elder said. Yet, in the light of this truth, the only power we have that they would heed is violence. If we employ that, coexistence seems unlikely. Florine, are the tribes you've worked with also like this? In the Great Forest of Tob, yes. The tribes in the Abelian Hills have had limited exchanges with Dark Dwarf merchants for as long as anyone can remember, but the Dark Dwarfs don't care about influence or political power amongst the tribes. Honestly, this discussion is making me feel more than a bit guilty about what we've been doing. She was all too aware of what Florine was talking about. Shortly after inheriting their titles, the royal court recognized Clara and her friends for their talents, and they were appointed to various duties around the Sorceress Kingdom. Among those duties was figuring out how to incorporate the various non-human populations into the kingdom. At first, their approach was not unlike that of Master Leeds, a one-sided conversion to the ways championed by the guilds, which in turn facilitated the transfer of resources to Rantel. It wasn't until much later that they understood how flawed their methods were, and how dangerous thoughtless integration could be. Though they went into their work with the potential differences between societies and races in mind, their understanding of those differences was shallow at best. The sheer power of the Sorceress Kingdom could keep the people in line for a time, but the differences in moral and material values inextricably tied to each race's realities would eventually come to a head if improperly addressed. Is something the matter, Countess Clara? Clara looked up from her thoughts to find Elder Char AC and a few other beastmen leaning forward to stare at her, whiskers twitching. She leaned back slightly in reaction, thankfully managing to keep herself from leaping away in fright. I was just considering how to best implement solutions to the problems your people presently face and will face in the future, Clara forced a calm tone. But I fear to prescribe anything precise with how little I know about Rolengork. The beastmen leaned back in their seats, exchanging still unreadable looks. Your thoughtfulness is most appreciated, Elder Char AC said. We have had our fill of people telling us what to do as of late. What else do you wish to know about us? Clara's gaze went past the beastmen to the blocky pyramid surrounding the court. Their existence was highly incongruous with what she had so far seen of the jungle society, representing an effort required by things that didn't seem to exist in Rolengork at present. If I were to ask about one thing at this point, she said, it would be why your institutions haven't evolved in line with the growth of your society. Our institutions? That's right. You have mystics who see to the physical well-being of your people while a group of elders function as judges, advisors, and community leaders. As expansive as your warrior caste is, it is at its core a collection of warbands tied to their respective tribes. In everything else, decisions are left to the individual. Is that a bad thing? In my experience, Clara said, if there is no organized effort to shape and maintain a society, then it is defenseless against both internal and external influences, even those without malice or purpose. Rolengork is particularly vulnerable to the guilds because they champion a set of values that are either outside the consideration of or outright inconceivable for the ruling clans. Their activities are effectively invisible even when what they do happens in plain sight. I believe Clan Pakan is fortunate in the sense that it re-established itself in an environment where it was exposed to the urban realities that the guild also operates within. This has made you aware of the effects of their actions, at least in the ways that are recognizable to you. But it isn't as if we're the only clan that rules over a city, Lady Shawk said. All of the big warrior clans do, and they've been around for far longer than us. I can only respond to that by offering my observations of urban centers in human society, my lady, Clara replied. Like the beastmen of Rolengork, we rebuilt our civilization out of the ruin caused by a great calamity in the past. I suspect it's the very same calamity that befell your people. Like your people, our lords established their rule over rural territories, and their values were shaped by the threats that they faced. By the time proper urban centers developed and the guilds set up shop, the culture of our aristocracy was already well entrenched. I see. Lady Shawk looked down at the rug that lay between them. Then how did you fix it? We haven't. Huh? To this day, Clara said, the vast majority of human lords lead distinctly rural lifestyles. They purposely separate themselves from urban populations, and their attitude towards those who exist outside of the culture of their aristocratic establishment usually ranges from aloof to belligerent. Solving the various problems that have arisen over the generations due to this lapse in proper governance has been one of my tasks in the Sorceress Kingdom, which is probably why Baroness Thradnik recommended my involvement in this discussion. While she could hardly claim any deep expertise on the matter, she still felt that Ludmilla had made the right decision. Addressing the issues that came with the guilds and urban life in general was far easier when they had yet to become nearly inextricable from one another. In that case, Elder Char AC said, what do you have in mind? How do we gain the power to defend ourselves against undesirable influences? By expanding on the institutions that maintain your society, Clara replied. Each of those institutions must be issued a mandate that defines how they contribute towards the future envisioned for your people. This, of course, also includes how you will respond to change. Our clan has discussed doing such things before, the Osalo elder said, but I am afraid that the necessary details as to how to achieve what you describe elude us. As busy as we are with our current situation, it's something we cannot afford to experiment with. Clara supposed that was another advantage that the guilds held when making their entry into new markets. Most candidates operated at subsistence levels due to one thing or the other and couldn't spare the resources to adapt to rapid change. Indeed, it was the promise of prosperity that made the guild's proposals so attractive, while the cost of prosperity was never mentioned or outright regarded as irrelevant. Out of curiosity, Leanne asked, how many elders does Clan Pakan have? Elder Char AC's gaze shifted from Clara to Leanne. 36, he answered after a moment's pause. 36? Leanne furrowed her brow. How many people live in this city? I don't think anyone knows for certain, the Osalo elder said. Visitors say that it is the largest city in the Confederation. Roughly 250,000, said a voice from behind Clara. Everyone looked up to find Dame Verilyn standing behind her. How long had she been standing there? How'd you get that number? Leanne asked. I saw them, Dame Verilyn answered. Ah, okay, Leanne's attention returned to the gathering. So you have 36 elders for 250,000 people. No wonder you don't have time for anything. Clan Pakan only presided over the area around this clanhold until recently, Elder Char AC said defensively. We had perhaps 1,000 closely tied members with another 10,000 who were loosely affiliated descendants. Back then, there wasn't any need for any more elders than we had. All right, so hire more elders. Hire? One does not hire elders as if they were everyday laborers. Our elders are chosen by the community based on their wisdom, character, and history with the clan. And because the vast majority of city dwellers live highly individualistic lives, Clara said, your traditional social infrastructure fell apart and there are no obvious candidates for the role. Precisely so. Fortunately, Clara said, you do not need elders to perform most of the work required. Not in the traditional sense, at any rate. What you need, at least to begin with, are civil servants, artists, and warriors. I can see that you already have the warrior part well in hand. We have toll collectors too, Lady Shawk added. Clara offered a friendly smile in response to the Overlord's hopeful tone. She had a lot of work ahead of her. Voltava once told us that these ancient buildings were created out of the memories of our people. Perhaps it was a necessity to facilitate what you describe. Florine looked up at the ruined pyramid nearest to their seats in Lady Shawk's court. She hadn't paid much attention to the clanhold's architecture on the first day of their visit, but their second day afforded them plenty of opportunities to take in the sights. As far as she could tell, the only well-maintained structures from Clan Pakan's forgotten past lay scattered around the top of the hill where the Osalo made their home. They were covered in intricate patterns and highly stylized imagery, but, if any of it meant anything, she couldn't figure it out. Paper will suffice, Clara said. Though it would be prudent to set aside facilities for the processing and storage of your records. The more we talk about this, Lady Shawk said, the more complicated it gets. It might seem that way right now, my lady, Clara said, but the individual responsibilities aren't complex. Those who take up this work will consider their tasks routine in no time. This individual thinks her responsibilities are already too complex as they are, Lady Shawk muttered. Well, that is the lot of a lord, is it not? There wasn't a shred of mercy in Clara's serene smile. Lady Shawk's ears drooped as she let out a long, rumbly sigh. I, too, have growing doubts over whether this can be accomplished, Elder Cha AC said. Even the things you consider rudimentary like this standardized education are beyond our ability to facilitate, and the number of people you recommend for it is larger than the original population of our clan. Don't underestimate your people's capabilities, Clara said. If they can handle the education of the guilds, then they can do this. The focus of your worries should be on raising dependable civil servants. Clara hadn't held back once she decided to advise the Beastmen on establishing a government that could meet their future needs. She was thorough about it, as well, covering everything required to build things up from scratch. Florine was familiar with most of it, but it still amazed her how Clara could smoothly adapt her work in the Sorcerer's Kingdom into a version that was suited for Roland Gork. Even the most obscure bits of precautionary legislation didn't escape her. Oh, look who's showing his face again. Florine turned her head slightly, spotting Master Leeds, who was flanked by a pair of beastmen, out of the corner of her eye. Leanne rose to her feet, unsuccessfully trying to brush the fur off of her dress. Guess I'll be the distraction again. Anything important scheduled for later? Another feast this evening. Are we gonna be subjected to that every night we're here? As funny as it is to watch Clara embarrass herself, we can't have her running off into a bush every time we sit down to eat. While it wasn't anywhere nearly as horrific as Queen Auricula suggested, Florine was fairly certain that dining with beastmen would still turn the stomachs of most humans. She was fortunate in the fact that she had spent months with the demi-humans in the Abelian Hills, or she might have very well gone and joined Clara the moment Lady Shawk and her court started to feed. It's time for us to do our thing, Leanne said in response to the curious gazes that followed her rise. We'll see you later today. Florine rose to accompany her friend and their ladies' maids fell into step behind them. Master Leeds noticed their approach only after they made it halfway across the court. Just the person I was looking for, he said. We're just about finished loading the first of your barges. Sounds good, Leanne replied. Let's get down there and send her off. She could almost feel the two maids bristle behind them at Master Lead's casual attitude. His behavior was according to plan, however. The animosity between nobles and merchants in the Draconic Kingdom was far greater than it was in the region's other nations, so they decided it was best to avoid inheriting it, at least in part. Master Leeds was initially confused by the idea that they were merchant nobles, but, during the first day of their negotiations, Clara and Ludmilla cast themselves as the nobles of the group while she and Leanne acted more like merchants. The result was predictable enough. Guildmaster Leeds now spent as much time with her and Leanne as he could while avoiding Clara and Ludmilla as much as possible. He didn't even spare a glance at the gathering on the far end of the court before turning to lead them away. "Any problems loading the cargo?" Leanne asked. "It was a rather uneventful night," the Guildmaster replied. "My only worry was that we wouldn't be able to finish loading by today even with all the extra hands we hired. Those barges of yours are a real marvel, aren't they?" Leanne grinned. "I only wish we could build them faster." "I believe you mentioned that they were built by dwarves?" "Yup. For now, the parts are forged inland and delivered wherever the ships need to be assembled. Things'll speed up when we can finally move the entire industry to our new ports." "Would it be possible to introduce these dwarves to us?" Master Leeds asked. "We'd love to have such excellent magical ships ourselves." Florine looked away from the conversation to watch the resident beastmen go about their business. The undead crews of each barge were securely hidden from potential observers, which ended up making it look like each ship somehow operated itself. Instead of trying to explain how the vessels worked, they simply allowed Master Leeds to arrive at his own conclusions. The ambitious guildmaster wouldn't question their tight-lipped stance on the matter, as the ships provided an overwhelming competitive advantage over their conventional counterparts and their sourcing would naturally be jealously guarded. "I'd have figured that a guildmaster from the Draconic Kingdom would have had contacts along the Cerulean Way for that sort of thing," Leanne said. Master Leeds chuckled softly at Leanne's assertion. "If only that was the case," he said. "I suppose an outsider might count the Draconic Kingdom as one of the nations of the Cerulean Way, but the reality is that we're nowhere near the roots of the Sapphire Coast's treasure fleets. We sit on the other side of the Dragon Belt and the Theocracy wouldn't take kindly to any crews that aren't human. I reckon the last enchanted vessel to grace our ports was probably the one used by the 13 heroes centuries ago." "What's the Dragon Belt?" Florine asked. "You haven't heard of it?" Master Leeds raised an eyebrow. "Not in any way that resembles the term, at least," Florine said. Yeah, I guess it's a term coined by the people on the other side of it. Anyone from this region wouldn't realize it exists. I'm sure you've heard the story of the 8 Greed Kings." "I have," Florine replied. "In their conquest of the world," the Guildmaster said, "their primary adversaries were the Dragon Lords of the time. Their defeat allowed new and existing powers to expand unchallenged until the next generation of dragons grew strong enough to stop them centuries later. So this Dragon Belt is the area where powerful dragons from this new generation have established their territories. Pretty much. To the people outside of it, it's effectively a wall. The Draconic Kingdom sits near a particularly nasty section of it. There's a volcanic range filled with red dragons that separates us from the rest of the Cerulean Way. As you might guess, few are crazy enough to sail ships loaded with valuable cargo through their territory, and the way around it is said to be just as dangerous, not to mention unprofitable. "If this wall exists," Leanne said, "then how does trade from the rest of the continent get to us through Carnassus and the Great Steppe?" "Probably because there's a different type of dragon populating that part of the belt. Still, the only things that make it through a dragon's territory are what the dragon lets through." Florine considered the implications of what they had learned. It certainly explained one mystery she had always pondered. If the powers further into the continent were so advanced, then why hadn't they expanded to the sorceress kingdoms part of the world over the centuries of their existence? The way being blocked by a bunch of dragons would have never occurred to her. Additionally, if the type of traffic allowed into the Dragon Belt depended on the type of dragon that presided over their respective part of it, one could speculate over the conditions of the surrounding region. The bards' tales so far proved consistent with their real experience with various types of dragons. Red dragons were covetous and domineering, and so no shipping lanes could be established between the Draconic Kingdom and the rest of the Cerulean Way. Green dragons were subversive schemers, and the reign of the Viridian Dragon Lord was in line with that characterization. White dragons preferred living in relative isolation in their icy domains, and the behavior of most of those within the Sorcerous Kingdom reflected that. What did that mean for Carnassus, the Great Steppe, and the lands beyond it? They had always framed their assumptions using the economic and logistical realities of trade, but what if the trickle of goods that made it through was actually the result of a dragon's whims? Even the types of people who arrived from the east could plausibly be controlled. With this in mind, what they knew of the world was likely even more limited than they believed. I've heard some people mention visitors from the Beastman Confederacy, Leanne said. If there are dragons in the way, how did they get here? You mean Soraka and his party? They came through the Great Loot. It's a part of the Dragon Belt ruled by blue dragons. So individuals can get through the belt, but countries can't expand into it since they would be challenging powerful dragons for territory. That's my understanding. We're gonna be buried in dragon parts. You can't assume that we'll be butchering dragons left and right. Why not? That's what happened to the Viridian Dragon Lord and her family. Dame Verilyn and her family were subjugated after their patriarch was killed. I doubt it'll be any different for any other dragons. Well, that part must change. There's no reason why we can't get along amicably. Diplomacy would become a nightmare if the Sorcerous Kingdom gained a reputation for indiscriminate slaughter. The nature of their nation created enough challenges as it was without doing things that confirmed the fears that people normally associated with the undead, fiends, and all manner of monstrous beings. The wharf was just as busy as when they left it in the morning, with beastmen of all sorts bearing loads to and from the vessels moored at each pier. A local ship that wasn't there before floated alongside one of them, its crew staring up at their enchanted steel counterparts. That one of yours? Leanne asked. We don't have any of the local dignitaries scheduled to arrive for the next while, Master Leeds answered, so it should at least be a cargo vessel. How does merchant shipping work around here anyway? Lady Shawk mentioned something about most of the river barges being owned by one clan or the other. That's the sad reality for now, the guildmaster said. It's rare for a merchant to have a ship of their own. The clans lease barges to those who aspire to do so, but merchants here make so little that most never achieve that dream. Now that we're here, that will change. A ship isn't exactly a wagon, Leanne noted. Even outside of Roland Gork, only the most successful or lucky get their hands on a ship. You are right about that, Master Leeds said, but those are established markets. There's so much untapped potential here that countless fortunes can be made. Florine did not doubt that he believed in every word that he said. She and her friends had divided their day between dealing with the guild in the morning and focusing on diplomacy and cultural exchange for the rest of the day. A few hours beforehand, the guildmaster had taken them on a tour of several trading outposts that had been established upriver from the clanhold. He presented them as a model for what he envisioned for Roland Gork's near future, with similar outposts populating the Confederation's entire river network. Those outposts would, of course, be owned and operated by the Merchant Guild. Speaking of untapped potential, Leanne said, have you considered what I brought up earlier today? You mean the distribution hubs? The guildmaster said, they are a sound idea. The cities we'd set them up in are each ruled by a different clan, however, so we'll have to work together with Lady Shawk to acquire the rights to operate in each one. Our trade flows should build up pretty quickly, Leanne told him, so it'd be better to get it done sooner rather than later. Of course. She suppressed the frown that threatened to form at Leanne's insistence. To a merchant, expanding into fresh new markets was always an enticing prospect. Combined with Master Leeds' enthusiasm, it was all too easy to encourage him to do so. The logic behind it was to divide Master Lead's limited pool of experienced staff between multiple governments in far-flung locales to stretch the guild's influence thin. Overextending in such a fashion was a novice error for a merchant from Re-Estais or the Empire, but a blind spot for someone from the Draconic Kingdom. They were used to moving quickly in step with their cycles of predation and recovery, and they had done so with their queen's blessing. Kaimali, how are we doing here? An Osalo of average stature standing on the wharf looked up from the vellum scroll in his paw. "Ah, Guildmaster," he said as his cat-like eyes went between Leanne and Florine. "We've just finished loading the last of the cargo. Feel free to inspect our work." Kaimali held out the scroll, which turned out to be a simple manifest not unlike those recovered from the Beastman camps in the Draconic Kingdom. Florine leaned in to read its content alongside Leanne, recalling the meaning of each pictograph scratched upon the vellum sheet. "When will you be transitioning to Merchant Guild formats?" Leanne asked. "This is mostly for the benefit of the dockworkers," Master Leeds answered. "Apprentices like Kaimali here are already well on their way to being able to read and write." "I see. Well, let's take a look inside." For not the first time, Florine pondered the implications of the guild's lopsided influence on Roland Gork. What would happen if the guilds controlled all formal education in a society? As they did elsewhere, only apprentices were taught how to read, write, and ply their trade. Everyone else was a potential customer. The more ignorant they were, the more profitable they became, and the more power the guilds would have. Their footsteps echoed off of the barge's metal hull as they made their way deep into the vessel's hold. Being forced to handle cargo conventionally exposed many of the problems they foresaw with operating their new ships in places without the proper supporting infrastructure, especially since they also couldn't use the undead for the methods they resorted to in the Draconic Kingdom. Piles of jute sacks and stacks of nug hides left little room to walk around, yet the sheer height of the hold left its total volume underutilized. Florine started as Master Leeds stumbled in the darkness and stomped around in an effort to regain his footing. "Please be careful, Master Leeds," she said. "I'm fine," the Guildmaster breathed. "Just caught my foot on a sack sticking out here. Speaking of which, you two don't seem to have any problems getting around." "The Sorceress Kingdom has more races with dark vision than those without," Florine replied. "We've had to adapt accordingly." "Magic items, eh? I wouldn't mind one for myself. How much does something like that cost?" "Magic items are less an issue of price and more one of availability." Master Leeds' face screwed up in confusion at her statement, but she doubted that she could have come up with a better explanation. To the Guildmaster, indeed, to the vast majority of merchants, the price of an item usually reflected its availability. With Warden's Vale increasingly becoming the center of magic item production in the Sorcerer's Kingdom, however, the common sense of a merchant's world was turned on its head. "They are hard to obtain through regular channels," Leanne said, "but maybe we could nab you one as a favor. Anyhow, looks like everything's in order here. Will you be able to load the next ship right away?" "We'll be able to start, but not finish. There are more than enough ships in Roland Gork to move what's required to fill your vessels, but we're going to have to build new warehouses to store enough inventory to load them every time they come in. Things should be a bit more balanced once we start importing stone from the foothills. In that case, we'll send 'em all off to bring back more goods. A lot of hungry nug are waitin'." Their cargo ships started drifting away from the port shortly after they disembarked. Many of the nearby beastmen stopped what they were doing to watch the vessels sail away, including Kaimali. "I have never seen such wondrous vessels in my life," he said. "How much does such a ship cost?" "Cheaper than you probably think," Leanne said, "but that much steel is still damn expensive." "Then I must work hard to afford one," the Osalo nodded to himself in a human-like fashion. "When I do, it will surely be the envy of all." "Kaimali's our most ambitious apprentice," Master Leeds told them. "He's been a leader when it comes to expanding our trade network. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to start working to get the next round of cargo in." Florine and Leanne smiled and waved as they parted ways with the master Leeds and his apprentice. She let out a silent sigh as the two disappeared at the top of the lift. "What now?" Florine asked. "Dunno," Leanne answered. "How about we go see how the little one is doing? I'm gonna scream if I end up like Clara did last night." "That was entirely her fault," Florine said. "If she didn't act the way she did, then those cubs wouldn't have been drawn to her." "Easy for you to say," Leanne made a face. "You've been living with predatory demi-humans for months." "They are not all predatory," Florine said. "Plus, I haven't been attacked by demi-humans even once in the Abelian Hills." "Pip," Leolio said. Leanne looked up at the demi-human perched atop Florine's head. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Nothing," Florine answered. "Let's be on our way, shall we?" They waited for their turn to ride the lift, then made their way into the first set of residential buildings to their right. Like the houses in Warden's Vale, they were by all appearances entirely utilitarian, albeit much smaller. Still, she couldn't sense any discontent from the residents. After walking a few dozen meters, they entered a small courtyard where an assortment of beastman cubs frolicked in the midday sun. A pair of adult beastmen turned their ears, and then their heads, to regard Leanne and Florine as they stepped out from between the houses. "Has he caused much trouble?" Florine asked. "None at all," one of the adults, a lithe-looking Lup, answered. "We were actually wondering if there was something wrong with him. Has he been ill?" Florine looked around until she spotted her Nar cub lying near one of the nearby houses. He rose to his feet and padded over as soon as he noticed her. "Not that I know of," Florine said as she picked him up. "I think he's just become used to being around other races. Most of them aren't as durable as beastmen." Countess Shawk mentioned something like that. The other adult, an Osalo whose fur was as nearly as dark as her rosettes, said that we were to keep our cubs away from the humans for fear of accidentally injuring them. "Still," the Lup said, "this isn't good. If he doesn't play, then how can become strong? Or learn to interact with others?" the Osalo added. "I must admit that I don't know much about raising a Nar cub," Florine said. "I just couldn't leave him when we found him all alone." She didn't know much at the beginning, but she discovered all sorts of issues in the time since she had adopted him. Not only was he a hazard to the other children at Director Alpha's orphanage, but he didn't seem to understand what was wrong with his behavior. Education was also a pressing issue. The cub couldn't physically pronounce most of the words of Re-Estize's language, no more than Florine could pronounce most of the words used in Roland Gork's language. Names, in particular, were a nightmare. Most were unpronounceable to humans, and they were lucky they could somewhat manage Lady Shawk's name, which sounded like a cross between a meow and a warble. "You have a kind heart," the Lup said. "But kindness alone does not ensure a proper upbringing. To play is to learn how to use one's body. To hunt and fight and move as one would need in the future. I fear that both his mind and body will be stunted if this goes on any further. What would you suggest that I do?" Florine asked. The two beastmen exchanged silent looks. "We have told you what the problem is," the Osalo answered. "What to do about it is not our decision to make." Florine hugged the Nar cub to her breast. Why did he have to be so cute and dangerous at the same time? The cub squirmed in response, so she set him back down. "We'll be here for the next few days, at least," she said. "Would you mind letting him be around the other children in the meantime?" "Not at all," the Osalo said. "Thank you so very much," Florine nodded. "Hopefully, he'll be able to open up a bit more to the others." She returned to the main avenue, a frown tugging at the corners of her lips. Leanne reached out to take her by the hand. "Let's go shopping," she said. "I don't feel like helping Clara torture the beastmen right now." Florine allowed herself to be led to the human quarter of the clanhold, but she didn't respond very well to her friend's attempts to cheer her up. As the day stretched on, more and more of Ludmilla's subjects appeared in the market, filling the air with a mix of different tongues. Florine stopped to listen to one conversation in particular, which involved an orc, a Gnar, and 3 humans. Are both of those merchants speaking Low Draconic? Yup. Why? I'm beginning to think we're speaking the wrong language. What's that supposed to mean? You were there when Queen Auricula spoke about Low Draconic. It's a language from the time when dragon lords dominated the world, created to be used by the vast majority of their subject races. The High Imperial in that diary Clara is translating makes the same considerations. The Sorceress Kingdom, on the other hand, still employs the language of Riestais. If we're supposed to be a nation of many races, then why is our official language one created for and by humans? Is that what's been on your mind this entire time? I thought you were worried about the cub. It's a related issue. He can't participate in classes because he can't pronounce over half of what he hears. I can't even give him a name out of the fear that he won't be able to use it. We're trying to create a system of education for all of the Sorceress Kingdom's citizens, but, as it is, we'll end up with countless children like him. Or they could just make any kind of noise and it'll just get translated like everything else. She shuddered at the future her friend had so flippantly suggested. It wasn't something that could be allowed to happen. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the market, where Florine was able to confirm the guild's beastman apprentices were able to speak passable Low Draconic regardless of race. She would have to bring up her observations with Clara and Director Alpha when the opportunity presented itself. As evening fell, they rejoined Clara and Ludmilla in Lady Shawk's court to attend the evening feast. This time, they were directed to their intended seating to the right of Lady Shawk's dais. The table was better made to accommodate humans, and Master Leeds and his associates were seated on the far end. Much to Clara's relief, the food being served was similarly prepared for human consumption. Oh, before I forget. Leanne bumped into her lightly as she shifted on their bench. Her friend reached into the infinite haversack on her waist and produced a wooden cask. This was supposed to be for yesterday, Leanne said, but all that stuff happened. How about some, Lady Shawk? The Osalo Lord looked down at them from her basalt throne. What is it? Wine from our Riverlands vineyards, Leanne said. I guess it couldn't hurt to. Just a moment, Lady Shawk, Master Leeds said from his end of the table. I would advise against that. She's offering a type of alcohol. Our guests may not know this, but alcohol is highly poisonous to Rolin Gork's beastmen. Oh, Leanne said, patting the cask. Well, that just means more for us. Oi, pour me some of that. Sure thing, your Major Gyar. What the heck are you doing here? Seated across from them was Draudillan Auriculus, holding out one of the carved wooden cups that had been placed upon their table. Florine and her friends stared, stunned at the sight. Master Leeds and his associates, however, immediately rose from their benches to genuflect before their queen. Why, Your Majesty? The guildmaster managed to choke out. Oh, you must be the fellows from Rivergarden. We hear you've been doing good work here. Sniffles and sobs filled the air as Queen Auricula's subjects were overwhelmed with emotion from their sovereign's recognition. Your Majesty's praise is wasted on your humble subjects, Master Leeds said. Have you come to bring us home? It's probably better that you stay. Rivergarden is underwater from all this flooding anyways. The Queen let out a helpless little laugh. Who is this? Lady Shawk asked as she came down to join them. Clara rose from her seat. Countess Shawk, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Draudillan Auriculus, Black-Scale Dragon Lord and Queen of the Draconic Kingdom. Queen Auriculus, Countess Shawk of Clan Pacan. Dragon? Wait, I thought the Draconic Kingdom was destroyed. Half-eaten, perhaps, Queen Auriculus said, but not destroyed. I see, Lady Shawk said. Then what about our armies that went to fight the undead? Have they survived as well? I'm sorry to say that I ripped out their souls and consumed them to address a certain injustice. But worry not. I hold no ill will against your people. A deathly silence fell over the gathering, periodically interrupted by the sound of Queen Auricula's pulling a draught from her cup and Leanne moving to refill it at her urging. When Lady Shawk next spoke, her voice could only be described as timid. "Then the undead, does that mean the undead army has been destroyed?" "The undead, huh, well, there is someone here who is better suited to explaining the situation with the undead than I." With her free hand, Queen Auricula pointed to Ludmilla. "The leader of the undead army you speak of is sitting right there."